What's good in the YouTube? This is Crazy Samurai 71 here, bringing another video. Today I'm bringing a video on Kamen Rider Build episode 42. This episode is called Legacy of Doubt, and the episode overall was really good. It expands on the story that we've seen so far, and it also explains certain things that are really important that I was really happy to learn. So for starters, the way the episode begins with us is that we end up seeing that they're back in the base. They're discussing different things. Specifically, we end up hearing them talking about how they lost the lost bottles in the previous episode because Sento unfortunately dropped them fighting Evolto. They end up discussing the fact that they're still trying to figure out where Sento's father is. And the thing is that one idea that they bring up is the fact that based on the fact that they're trying to find these bottles and everything, and that they were targeting Shimazu, the assistant that was the assistant to Sento's father. They're actually thinking that maybe Sento's father is working with Evolto, and that's a concern that they have. But they need to figure out where he actually is, like what are his whereabouts. So they're not completely set on that, but they do think it's a very high possibility and fairly probable. So what does end up happening following this, though, is that we end up seeing elsewhere in the villain base that they're discussing things. They mention how when it came to Shimazu, the reason why they actually kept him alive in the first place after the first episode was only because of the fact that he had the potential to become a lost Smash. The thing is that typically when it comes to the Smash monsters, once they're gone, they're gone. They don't reuse them. The main reason why he was kept for so long was for that specific reason. That's why Evolto kept him around. It had nothing to do with his connection to Sento or to Sento's father. It was just for that specific reason, which is interesting to consider. We end up also learning about how, there's a dark panel and everything, and he's trying to power that up. And we learned that from the previous episode, but the thing is that we also hear again the mention of the fact that they're considering using the Kamen Riders to act as Lost Smash. As we know, Sento rejected the Lost Smash bottle, which is important because what that means is that he can't use that, or at least in his current state, he's not able to. What we also end up seeing, we also end up learning, which is something that we knew in the previous episode, but it was only mentioned briefly at the very end, which is the fact that Evolto has gained human emotions. So he does have human emotions. Again, he is a Martian, so he isn't meant to have human emotions until this point where he gained them in the previous episode. So what does end up happening is that after all this is said and done, they do end up deciding to go and attack, and they want to get the Lost Smash bottles, obviously. So following this, what we do end up seeing is that Sento ends up having to do attack. There's actually two setups. So there's an attack going on with Sento and Gentaku, who are attacking in a district area, where what happens is that they're fighting Evolto and also a Smash monster. It's not clear if it's a Lost Smash. Like, they don't really do a whole big introduction like they've been doing with the Lost Smash in the past, so it's not really clear as to whether or not it's really a Lost Smash or it's just a Smash monster. But what ends up happening is that we end up seeing Sento transform into Genius mode, while Gentaku transforms into Rogue. Gentaku ends up fighting the Smash monster, while Sento ends up fighting against Evolto. And at one point, Evolto uses his black hole finish, which actually leads to him being able to suck up the Totoo area. So he actually sucks up the entire area, leaving it in shambles. The people, it's not clear as to whether or not they're destroyed or what, but basically the Totoo that they knew is gone, which is pretty terrible. Now, as far as things go elsewhere, we also have it where Ryoga and Kazumi are fighting against Mad Rogue and some hard guardians. What we do end up seeing is that initially the fight's going okay, like no one's really having a clear advantage, but then at one point when Ryoga looks up at the sky seeing the black hole finish happening, he has a vision again, which brings him back to that past image on Mars where it was being sucked up and destroyed. And what happens is that he suddenly gets a resurgence of energy and begins to gain increased strength. And what happens is that he starts going really, really fast, making all sorts of crazy moves, and eventually manages to beat back Mad Rogue, which is pretty crazy to watch. And at one point he manages to knock a bottle away from him, and that bottle, he actually, when he holds it, it turns silver, and he puts it inside of his magma knuckle and uses it with the magma knuckle to really beat back Mad Rogue. Eventually, after the black hole finish is done, Yveltal retreats, and then we end up seeing with Ryoga and Kazumi that Mad Rogue also retreats. So all that's happening, but we do end up seeing that Ryoga is just insistent upon destroying and taking out Mad Rogue and the Hard Guardians. In fact, once Mad Rogue leaves, what happens is that he ends up beating on a Hard Guardian that's on the ground. He just starts beating on him incessantly, and Kazumi tries to stop him. But then following this, what we end up seeing is that we end up hearing the sounds of Nin comics, and then what happens is that a huge fog is brought in, which normally would be used to kind of teleport them out, you would think, if this were Sento. But what happens is that we hear that, and then we end up hearing Rabbit Tank, the sound effects for that, and suddenly, after all that's done, the fog disappears. We end up seeing that Ryoga has detransformed and he's not in the best shape, but they don't even mention anything about this whole situation in the next scene, which is a part that's very confusing to me, because you would have thought that something like that would be like the first topic you would mention when you go back to the base. They don't do that. In fact, the next time we see the appearance of Build, because this is actually a figure that's portraying Build, who can access the Build driver and can become Kamen Rider Build with this combination, he's looking over at them and just isn't impressed with what they are, Ryoga and Kazumi. And the thing is that it's like that thing just happened, but they don't even acknowledge it when they confront Sento, and it's clear like they don't even know what occurred. So it's interesting, and following this, what does end up happening is that we end up seeing back at the base that they're trying to figure out what they can do to continue to search for Sento's father. They're trying to look through the database, which they still can't find anything on his father that would give them a trail. In the meantime, what we also end up seeing is that eventually they end up getting contacted again. Oh no, that's right. Mido, the Saito Prime Minister, we end up seeing. Now, Mido, as we know, was destroyed several episodes ago by Yveltal. And what happens is that he ends up taking the stage, speaking to the entire country about, uniting and joining together and not being these separate forces, but instead becoming one united force. And the thing is that the country ends up supporting his ideas and thinks that everything he's doing is going to be great. And then following this, what ends up happening is that everyone knows that it's not, Sento and the others know it's Yveltal portraying him. And that's a very important detail, because he's trying to unite these people, but at the same time he's trying to monopolize Lost Smash. He's trying to make several people throughout the country turn into them so he can do something, which is still not clear, because it's like originally he only wanted the few Lost Smash that he needed, but in this case it sounds like he's wanting more. And this is something that Utsumi mentions to him, that it seems like what is your real goal here, like what is your purpose? You originally only wanted the 10 and now you want all the different ones from around the country. What's going on? So clearly there's something bigger that's happening here, because Lost Smash are not supposed to be something that's supposed to be multiplied so many times over. What we do end up seeing as well is that following this, they are continuing to discuss different things about the current situation when they're contacted about another attack occurring in Area B of the country, like another area location, and this time what happens is that they split up. Same split up. It's Gintaku and Sento, and then Kazumi and Ryoga separating. So they go to B and E, I think, are the two areas they go to. I believe it's Ryoga and Kazumi go to B, and then Sento and Gintaku go to E. There's also a point in the episode where we end up seeing Gintaku very upset because of the fact that, Totoro was destroyed, and the thing is that his father's main request was for him to protect Totoro and do well by its people, and he just feels terrible. At the same time, what we end up seeing at one point is that Sento has this vision of his memories, and he ends up connecting with Katsuragi Takame about, he's really determined to find his father, and he still trusts that he's a good person, yet Katsuragi is not so convinced. He feels like his father probably isn't as good as Sento wants to believe he is anymore, and his reasons for doing things may not have been for justice, may have been for something much darker and much more evil, because that's what he's thinking, and it's not a bad thought. Sento's a little bit more optimistic as a character in general, so it is an important detail to consider. But what we do end up seeing is that after this, as I said before, Gintaku is feeling upset. Sento also brings up the fact that, his whole purpose was to, really learn the rider system and make it strong and do right by it. And the thing is that they both have goals that they weren't able to achieve. And that's something that they both kind of connect over in this episode. But eventually, when they do end up getting into the fight that I mentioned before, we end up seeing that Kazumi and Ryoga end up fighting some Hard Guardians as well as Mad Rogue, which is pretty cool. Yes, that's right. Oh, no, wait, hold on. I'm confusing it. It wasn't Mad Rogue. No, they were fighting a Smash Monster. I got confused because Evolto wasn't involved in either fight. That's something that's important. But instead, Mad Rogue actually fights Gintaku and Sento, which we end up seeing, and that's pretty interesting because as he fights them, they end up using Rogue and the Genius form again. And initially, Gintaku's getting beaten down. Utsumi's talking really negatively about how he was never able to accomplish his father. Like Gintaku was not able to accomplish his father's goal, and how you must be seen as a failure, and your father died in vain, and you're now gonna end up going to meet him, like basically implying that he's gonna kill him, and he basically just tries to tear him apart. Which again, Utsumi, I understand that he's had like a really rough time with Gintaku in the past, but it's just pretty crazy to think of how far the story has come with him, being on the opposite end and really just kind of treating him terribly. It makes sense, but still. So what does end up happening eventually is that after all this is said, Gintaku's saying all this negative stuff, eventually, not Gintaku, Utsumi saying negative stuff, eventually Sento has this moment where he realizes he can't give up, and he brings up the fact that he won't give up, and he'll continue to protect the country. And eventually Gintaku resonates with this, and he remembers what his father said to him about protect this country, you fool. And like that was his last words, basically. It was a little bit more than that, but basically that's the idea of it. And the thing is that my foolish son, I think it was, protect this country, my foolish son. And at this point, what ends up happening is that Gintaku and Sento get charged up. They end up using their finishing moves, where Sento does his all sides finished move, which is really cool, and at the same time Gintaku does his finishing move. So they both go in for their finishing moves against Mad Rogue, which leads to him de-transforming, and Utsumi still feeling like, I won't lose, and he ends up teleporting away. But following this, what we do end up seeing is that suddenly the appearance of another Kamen Rider build occurs, and we end up seeing this build. And what happens is that they're wondering who could it be that is portraying Build, and he jumps down to eye level with them, and what happens is that he suddenly de-transforms, and it's revealed to be Sento's father. Yes, so that's what happens. Sento is in shock as he sees this, and clearly he's not on the side of good, and he's clearly evil. We don't know all the details of it, but yes, that is what's happening. He is going to be portraying Build in some capacity. We don't know if he'll have additional forms that will be different than what Sento will get to have or not. Again, because of the fact that he has access to the Pandora's box, because he's working with Evolto, all the bottles that Evolto has, he probably has access to. So that's why earlier he was able to use the Nin Comics combination. It's because he has those other bottles that he's able to do these kinds of things. So keep that in mind. Otherwise, that's about it. We do see in the preview that apparently Sento does struggle to face his father, and that leads to him holding back a lot when they end up confronting each other. In fact, he tries to protect his father. What we also end up seeing in the preview is that apparently Mizora is going to become a Lost Smash, which is pretty interesting because we do end up seeing her holding up a bottle and putting it to her neck, like we've seen before with a lot of Lost Smash, which actually makes sense that she would be a Lost Smash just because of her connection to Vernage and because of how important she is as a character in general. Also, I've known about this for the past week or so now, so that's another thing to consider, that she was going to become a Lost Smash. What we should also be seeing in the near future, probably I would imagine in episode 44, maybe 45, is the true form of Evolto. Yes, he has another form, and that will be his real form, not his form that he's taking on to look like Suichi. He's going to look like himself, which is this monster form that is very different, but it works. We'll get into that soon. So until then, guys, please remember to like, comment, subscribe, and I hope to see you guys in the next video. So until then, guys, I'm Crazy Summer 71, and goodbye, guys.